The city pulsed with a sinister energy as night fell, casting long, malevolent shadows that stretched like grasping claws. The once familiar streets, bustling with life just hours ago, now seemed alien, threatening. A cold wind howled through the canyons of towering buildings, carrying with it the stench of decay and a faint whisper of menace that sent shivers down our spines. We, three friends on a night out, found ourselves stranded in the heart of the city's darkest underbelly, our laughter and carefree spirits replaced by a growing sense of dread. Each flickering streetlight seemed to mock our predicament, casting an unsettling glow on the graffiti-marred walls and shuttered storefronts that lined the desolate streets. The city, once a symbol of excitement and opportunity, had transformed into a menacing predator, and we were its prey, lost and hunted in its concrete jungle.
The map lay useless in my trembling hands, its brightly coloured lines a cruel mockery of our situation. We were hopelessly lost, turned around by a maze of identical streets and our own mounting panic.
This is bad, man, really bad.
Mark muttered, his usually jovial face etched with worry as he scanned our surroundings with nervous glances. Even Sarah, the bravest of our trio, was uncharacteristically quiet, her gaze darting nervously into the shadows that seemed to writhe and pulse with unseen threats. We had walked for what felt like hours, each step a heavy weight of despair dragging us closer to an unknown fate. Fear, raw and primal, began to gnaw at the edges of our composure, threatening to unravel the fragile threads of hope we clung to. Each gust of wind seemed to carry with it whispered threats, the city's breath hot on our necks as it stalked us through the labyrinthine streets. Just when our hope began to dwindle, its flame flickering precariously in the face of despair, a faint light appeared in the distance. A beacon of possibility in the desolate landscape of our fear, it pulled us forward with the promise of salvation. We stumbled towards it, our pace quickening, fueled by a desperate hope that this was not another cruel trick of the night. As we drew closer, the outline of a building emerged from the darkness, its silhouette stark and imposing against the inky sky.
Could this be our refuge? A sanctuary from the oppressive darkness that pressed in on us from all sides? Or was it a siren's call, luring us towards an even greater danger lurking within its decaying walls?
The building loomed before us, a monolith of shadows and silence. Its chipped stone facade was etched with the grime of ages, and the flickering light within seemed to beckon us forward with a mixture of promise and menace. A heavy wooden door, barely clinging to its hinges, offered a fragile barrier between us and the unknown. Taking a deep breath to steady my nerves, I pushed against the door. It groaned in protest, the sound echoing through the stillness like the death rattle of a forgotten beast. The air inside was thick with the smell of dust and decay, a musty scent that spoke of long years of abandonment. We stepped cautiously into the building's maw, our senses on high alert. As our eyes slowly adjusted to the dimness, the building began to reveal its secrets. We found ourselves standing in what was once a grand foyer. A sweeping staircase, now missing several steps, and covered in a thick layer of dust, dominated the center of the room. Faded grandeur clung to the high ceilings adorned with intricate moldings, now cracked and crumbling. Torn velvet curtains, their once vibrant colors bleached to a ghostly gray, hung limply from tarnished gold rods. They framed windows that offered glimpses into the desolate street outside, the flickering streetlights doing little to penetrate the oppressive gloom within. A chill ran down my spine as I noticed a shattered vase lying on its side near the foot of the stairs. Shards of delicate china were scattered across the floor, remnants of a life lived and lost within these walls. We moved deeper into the building, our footsteps echoing through the silence. Each room we entered told a similar story of decay and abandonment, A grand dining room with a long, dust-covered table that could have seated dozens now housed only cobwebs and shadows. A library with shelves full of decaying books, their titles lost to time and neglect, seemed to whisper forgotten secrets. In a dusty parlour, we discovered a tattered armchair facing a cold fireplace. A half-finished game of chess lay on a small table beside it, the pieces frozen in time as if the players had merely stepped away for a moment.
Let's just stick together.
As we continued our exploration, the atmosphere grew heavier, the air thick with a palpable sense of dread. The flickering light cast grotesque shadows that danced across the walls, taking on menacing shapes that seemed to writhe and contort before our eyes. We stumbled upon a room that had once been a nursery. A rocking horse stood frozen mid-gallop in the centre of the room, its once bright paint now faded and peeling. A crib with rusted bars stood against one wall. A tattered blanket draped over its side. Scrawled on the wall above the crib, in what looked like dried blood, was a single word: beware. We stood frozen, our breaths caught in our throats, as the chilling message on the nursery wall seemed to pulsate with a malevolent energy.
Beware, it warned, its crimson letters a stark contrast to the peeling paint and decaying wallpaper.
This is messed up, even for this place, Mark whispered, his voice barely audible above the sudden silence that had descended upon us.
He took a step back, his gaze darting nervously around the room, as if expecting the walls themselves to reach out and grab him. Sarah, usually the bravest of us, stood rooted to the spot, her face pale and drawn.
"Did you hear that?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling slightly.
She took a step closer to Mark and me, her hand reaching out to clutch at my arm. The mournful moan intensified, growing louder, closer, until it felt like it was echoing inside my own skull. The temperature plummeted, the air turning icy cold as a wave of unseen malice washed over us. Suddenly, the rocking horse in the center of the room began to move. It rocked back and forth, slowly at first, then faster and faster, its wooden hooves thudding against the bare floorboards. The sound was deafening in the silence, a relentless rhythmic pounding that seemed to reverberate through our very bones.
We need to get out of here, Mark said, his voice tight with fear.
Sarah and I hesitated for a moment, our gazes locked on the rocking horse as it continued its frantic dance before we too turned and fled. We stumbled through the darkened corridors, our hearts pounding in our chests. The air was thick with the stench of decay and the sound of our ragged breathing. Shadows danced at the edge of our vision, taking on menacing shapes that seemed to reach out for us with unseen hands. As we rounded a corner, we came to an abrupt halt. Standing at the end of the hallway, bathed in the pale moonlight that streamed in through a broken window, was a figure.
"Run!" Sarah screamed, her voice high-pitched and frantic.
We didn't need to be told twice.
We ran blindly, our lungs burning, our legs screaming for respite.
We had to get out, had to escape this nightmare.
But the house seemed to twist and turn in on itself, the corridors stretching out before us like a labyrinth with no exit. We burst into a room, slamming the door shut behind us. We fumbled with the lock, our fingers trembling, but it was no use. The door was old, the lock rusted and broken. The heavy footsteps stopped outside the door. Silence. We held our breath, our hearts pounding against our ribs like trapped birds. The doorknob rattled, a slow, deliberate testing of our flimsy defences.
Mark, his face pale but resolute, grabbed a heavy candlestick from a nearby table.
Sarah, her eyes wide with terror, clutched at my arm, her nails digging into my flesh.
The rattling grew more insistent, the wood of the door groaning under the assault. Then, with a splintering crash, the door burst open. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the pale moonlight that streamed in through the broken window at the end of the hall, was the figure. It was taller than I remembered, its gaunt frame seeming to stretch impossibly high, its ragged clothes billowing around it like shrouds. The shadows that clung to it writhed and pulsed, obscuring its face, leaving only the impression of two burning eyes that bored into us with an icy intensity that stole our breath. For a moment we were paralyzed, frozen in the headlights of our own terror. The figure took a step forward, and the shadows around it seemed to reach out, grasping, searching. A low growl emanated from its throat, a sound that vibrated with a hunger that seemed to consume the very air around us. "Run!" Mark shouted, snapping us out of our stupor. He lunged forward, swinging the candlestick with all his might. It connected with something solid, and the figure stumbled back with a hiss of what sounded almost like pain. We didn't wait to see what happened next. We scrambled to our feet and bolted, our only thought escape. We didn't know where we were going, only that we had to get away from that thing. We ran through the darkened house, our lungs burning, our legs screaming for mercy. We dodged cobwebs and leaped over piles of debris, our only guide the pale moonlight that filtered in through the grimy windows. The sound of the figure's enraged roar echoed behind us, urging us onward.
We burst out of a room and found ourselves in a long, narrow corridor. At the end of the hallway, a sliver of light beckoned like a beacon of hope.
We surged forward, our hearts leaping with the desperate hope that we had found a way out of this nightmare.
But as we drew closer, the light resolved itself into another window, this one boarded up. We were trapped. The hallway was a dead end.
We spun around, our hearts sinking like stones in our chests, just as the sound of heavy footsteps echoed behind us once more. The figure was gaining on us.
Terror lent us speed. We doubled back, retracing our steps, searching desperately for another way out. We stumbled through room after room, each one a mirror image of the last, all dust and decay and the oppressive weight of despair.
We rounded a corner and came face to face with another figure. This one was different. It was smaller, more delicate, its form obscured by a white gown that flowed around it like mist.
Its face was hidden in the shadows, but as it raised its head, a single tear rolled down its cheek, leaving a shimmering trail in the dust.
It looked at us with an expression of profound sadness, an unspoken plea in its eyes.
And then it was gone, vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving behind only a lingering sense of melancholy and the faint scent of lavender. We didn't have time to dwell on the strange apparition. The sound of the other figure's heavy breathing was getting closer. We had to keep moving. We had to find a way out, or we would be trapped here forever. Driven by pure primal fear, we pushed onward, our lungs screaming for air. The floorboards groaned ominously beneath our feet, the sound of splintering wood echoing through the darkness. The air grew thick with the smell of damp earth and decay, the scent of something ancient and evil.
We rounded a sharp corner, our path illuminated only by the pale light of the moon filtering through a nearby window, and stumbled to a halt. The floor had given way, collapsing in on itself to reveal a gaping chasm below.
The drop seemed to stretch down into infinity, the darkness at the bottom impenetrable, promising only oblivion.
"No!" Sarah cried out, her voice laced with desperation. She stumbled backwards, her eyes wide with terror.
Mark reached out to steady her, his own face pale and drawn. We were trapped, the figure closing in behind us, the abyss yawning before us. The floorboards creaked ominously beneath our feet, threatening to give way at any moment. We were running out of time, out of options, out of hope.
I scanned the room frantically, searching for any way out, any escape from this impossible situation.
My gaze fell on a heavy antique wardrobe, its dark wood surface scratched and dull in the dim light. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot we had.
"Help me with this,"
I gasped, pushing against the heavy piece of furniture. Mark, his face etched with exertion, joined me, and together we managed to shift the wardrobe inch by agonizing inch towards the edge of the abyss. The floorboards groaned in protest, threatening to give way beneath the weight.
"Hurry!"
Sarah urged, her voice tight with fear. She was right. We could hear the figure approaching, its heavy footsteps echoing through the darkness, each one drawing closer, sealing our fate. With one final desperate push, we heaved the wardrobe forward. It teetered precariously on the edge of the abyss for a heartbeat, then plunged into the darkness with a deafening crash. We didn't hesitate. We clambered onto the wardrobe, clinging to its slick, dusty surface as it swung precariously over the abyss. The darkness below seemed to reach up for us, its icy fingers brushing against our skin, pulling us down. The wardrobe slammed against the opposite side of the chasm, the impact jarring our teeth.
We scrambled off our precarious perch, collapsing onto the solid floor beyond, gasping for breath.
We had made it. We were alive.
But our relief was short-lived. A blood-curdling scream pierced the darkness, echoing through the empty house. It was Sarah.
We spun around, our hearts in our throats, to see Sarah standing on the edge of the abyss, her eyes wide with terror. The figure stood behind her, its skeletal hand clamped over her mouth, stifling her cries. It was a grotesque parody of a human being, its flesh decayed and rotting, its eyes burning with a cold, malevolent light.
"Leave her alone!"
Mark roared, his voice raw with fury and despair. He took a step towards the figure, but I grabbed his arm, pulling him back.
"It's too late, Mark. We have to go."
Mark hesitated for a moment, his gaze torn between me and Sarah. Then, with a strangled cry of anguish, he turned and ran towards the faint sliver of light that marked the exit, pulling me along with him. We didn't look back. We couldn't. The image of Sarah, trapped in the clutches of that nightmare, was seared into our minds, a haunting reminder of the price of our freedom. We had escaped with our lives, but we knew, deep down, that we would never truly be free of that night, that house, that horror. The first rays of dawn pierced through the grimy windows of Mark's apartment, painting the worn furniture with a sickly yellow light. We sat huddled on the floor, our backs against the wall, too drained to move, too terrified to sleep. The city outside was slowly coming back to life, the sounds of traffic and distant sirens filtering in through the thin glass. But the nightmare we had just escaped remained etched in our minds, as vivid and horrifying as ever.
Mark sat staring blankly at the wall, his eyes bloodshot, his face pale and drawn. He hadn't spoken a word since we had burst into his apartment, the echoes of Sarah's scream still ringing in our ears. I wasn't sure if he had even blinked. He looked like a ghost, haunted by something unspeakable.
I wanted to scream, to cry, to do something, anything to break the oppressive silence that hung between us like a shroud. But the words wouldn't come. The horror of that night had choked them off, leaving me feeling hollowed out, empty. All I could see was Sarah's face, contorted in terror as the figure dragged her back into the darkness. All I could hear was her screams echoing through the empty halls of that godforsaken house. And all I could feel was the icy grip of fear tightening around my heart, squeezing the life out of me.
We never spoke of that night again. What words could possibly express the sheer terror, the bone-chilling dread that we had experienced? What words could possibly do justice to Sarah's memory, to the sacrifice she had made? We tried to move on, to pick up the pieces of our shattered lives and rebuild. But the echoes of that night followed us, whispering in the shadows, lurking at the edge of our vision. Every creaking floorboard, every unexpected noise sent shivers down our spines, brought back the memory of that house, that figure, that horror. We were never the same. The carefree joy we once felt had been extinguished, replaced by a constant gnawing fear that never quite went away. We had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had looked back into us, leaving its mark on our souls. And sometimes, in the dead of night, when the world was quiet and the shadows seemed to stretch and writhe, I could almost hear Sarah's voice, whispering on the wind, calling my name. And I would know with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that some horrors never truly die. They just wait patiently in the darkness for their next victims. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment, thumbs up, subscribe and click the bell for notifications.